Greetings, everyone. I'm Greg Morrisett, the Jack and Rilla Neafsey Dean and Vice Provost here at Cornell Tech in New York City. I joined here in 2018. Just prior to that, as many of you know, I was the Dean of what's now Cornell Ann Bowers College of Computing and Information Science in Ithaca. I'm so happy about that. Thank you very much, Ann. Even though I worked closely with Cornell Tech when I was back in Ithaca around faculty and research, there were many, many things that I only came to appreciate once I was down here in New York City. One example is a studio where our master students problem solve and build products and interdisciplinary teams led by practitioners like the former CTO at Etsy, and working directly with representatives from companies or NGOs or government agencies. I'd heard Cornell Tech faculty talk about just how wonderful that program was, but to actually see it in operation in person, it really gave me a sense of what's wonderful and special about this place. Another thing that's really special about Cornell Tech is the Jacobs Technion-Cornell Institute, which is really our experimental skunkworks part of the Cornell Tech campus. We're able to experiment in ways there that would be hard for either Cornell or the Technion on its own to do. And the Runway Startup Program, which we're going to talk about today, epitomizes that kind of independence and innovation. More on this in a minute, but first, I'd like to introduce the panelists that are joining me here today, and for whom we'll be learning a lot about their companies and their operations in the Runway Postdoc Program in just a second. But let me start by first introducing Assaf Glazer. Assaf is the chairman and founder of Nanit. This is a company that produces a smart baby monitor that uses machine learning algorithms to provide deep sleep insights through first-of-its-kind camera vision. He received his PhD at the Technion, specializing in machine learning and computer vision. And in 2014, as part of our very first cohort of Runway folks, he joined the program and he developed his company over the next couple of years. Since then, Nanit has been named as one of the best inventions of 2018 by Time Magazine, and has raised approximately $75 million from leading investors, including GV, formerly Google Ventures, and Jerusalem Venture Partners, who have a big outfit right here in New York City, amongst others. So Assaf, welcome. We're really excited to have you. Next up, we have Neve O'Hara. Neve is the CEO and co-founder of Biotia. This is a company leveraging genomics and AI to fight infectious disease. She's also a research assistant professor at SUNY Downstate Health Sciences University. Neve completed her postdoc in the Runway program back in 2018, and her work has been published in top-ranked journals, including Nature Communications, and featured in the Genome Web, Popular Science, the Huffington Post, and Wired. Most recently, though, she was selected as a TED-Med Hive Innovator for 2020. Neve, welcome. Next up, we have Server Ertem. Server is a New York City-based biotech entrepreneur and the founder and CEO of Katena TDX. A Runway Startup Fellow since September of 2019, Server's background is in cancer biology and immunology. He earned his PhD from Weill Cornell Medicine back in 2009 and followed that up with a postdoctorate at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center here in New York. At Katena, he's working on building a digital prognostic test that uses computer vision and machine learning to help oncologists choose the right treatment for their patients. Welcome, Server. And last, but certainly not least, is Rebecca Brachman. Rebecca is the founder of 525 Bio and a former TED Fellow who, as a neuroscientist, is best known for her pioneering work establishing the field of preventative psychopharmacology. In 2014, Rebecca discovered the first drugs that might actually enhance psychological resilience against stress and prevent psychiatric disorders. Her research has been featured in The Atlantic, Wired, and Business Insider. Rebecca earned her PhD in neuroscience from Columbia, and prior to that, she was a fellow at the National Institutes of Health. Welcome, Rebecca. Great. All right, now you've met all of our panelists, and I just want to say a few more things about the Runway program itself before we get started. Runway is where we take our newly minted PhDs, actually PhDs from all over the world, who've done some deep technical science research, but they want to have a commercial impact. And we bring them here to Cornell Tech to train them to be CEOs. We give them some of the same tools other incubators might provide, but we're able to give them a much more supportive environment and give them sufficient time to build their company, maybe 2 years instead of just 3 months, as you'll find in other incubators. Typically, we get around 40 applicants a year from all over the world. And these candidates are narrowed down to a final cohort of usually 4 postdocs. And we're looking for deep technical research that will have big impact. Currently, we're in the process of recruiting our 2021 cohort, and our hope is to find candidates who have research with viable commercial application, as well as the right stuff, if you know what I mean. Entrepreneurs that are going to take off. So our mantra is that we give them the runway and it's their job to get airborne. To give you some idea of the scope and the impact of the Runway program, since it was launched in 2014, here are some numbers. We've had 32 companies by 48 founders with over 195 employees. 26 of these companies are still in operation. That's more than 80%, which anybody in the business knows that's a great hit rate. And 100% of these companies are headquartered here in New York City. That's important because when we built the Cornell Tech campus, we came here to help build the tech scene in New York. And so that commitment to the city was part of our mission. And so having all these runway companies based here in New York City is really helping us achieve that mission and that vision. There have been 33 patents that have been issued based on the research of the Runway postdocs and $117 million in pre-seed and seed funding that's been raised. Clearly, we're doing something right. And fortunately, many are starting to take note. Runway's been featured in Fast Company and Harvard Business Review, and a white paper about this model was recently published in the Journal of Technology Transfer. We're happy to share all those links, but the best way to learn about Runways is to hear directly from our fabulous postdocs. At this time, we're going to show you a brief video to give you an overview of the program.
Moving from academia to the real world is very challenging. My PhD was an amazing experience for me, but at some point I felt that all the work is being summarized into an article that you publish.
Runway was a really great bridge, 1 foot in academia and 1 foot in industry.
At the end, you are building a business. It is not a research project. An article is not enough. You need to bring it to the market.
With the Runway program at Jacobs Institute, they taught me how you can turn a PhD into a CEO, which not only has the toolbox to build the product, but also go-to-market strategy, product market fit, and many other things that as an academic you don't think about at all. One of the unique things about the portfolio companies of the Runway program, every single one of them has been built on a very deep technology that is incredibly hard to replicate, and it needs its own special type of support to build and scale.
Innovating in the healthcare industry is very challenging.
Hospitals tend to use technology that they're familiar with, and they also change very slowly. Being at the Jacobs Institute allowed us to start those pilots and engagements with hospitals.
One of the major benefits in the Runway program is the access to very experienced mentors.
The president of the Technion, he is one of the founders of sleep medicine. He really helped connect me to top researchers in this field to create this value proposition from bottom up.
We launched from the Runway program in 2016. We built out a minimum viable product, which we've implemented in 5 hospitals.
We are now working to prepare the product for our FDA submission.
Today we sell in all North America in all major channels.
We hit a major milestone. We're operating in 8 different states and collected over 100 million square foot worth of construction data.
At some point you need to have your wings. This is your company. Maybe this is why you call it a runway. You know, it's a runway and at the end you need to fly.
To get started with our panelists, I'm going to ask each of them to tell us a little bit about their company and what they're currently working on. So let's start with Assaf and Nanit. Assaf?
Yes, thanks for having us. So my name is Assaf Glazer, and I'm the chairman and founder of Nanit. As Greg mentioned, I was part of the first cohort in January 2014. My background is my PhD. I made it at the Technion, Israeli Institute of Technology, specialized in machine learning and computer vision. My background started in the Air Force. I dealt with missile defense technology. I'm a major in reserve, and then I moved to deal with semiconductors at Applied Materials. We built actually a computer vision platform that sits on top of imaging system and classify defects on silicon wafer using machine learning and computer vision. And I'm saying so because when I had my first boy 9 years ago, Woody. I have 3 boys since then. I said, why not replacing these semiconductors with babies and do process control for babies? So this was actually my idea. I called it back then IntelliNanny, and I applied with this idea to the Runway and got accepted. And this is where my journey started. Today, we have hundreds of thousands of active users and babies that are sleeping better with Nanit around the globe in the US, in Canada, in the UK. It is a baby monitor that you put above your crib. You use computer vision and machine learning technology to classify sleep and parental intervention. And by looking at these pattern behaviors over time, we trigger tips and recommendations for parents on how to improve sleep. We have a few other products that we launched since then. We have a breathing wear. It's kind of a swaddling blanket or a sleeping bag, 100% cotton, no electronics, but have patterns around the chest area. And it can be used to track movement, chest movement, and we can potentially alert on sleep apnea. And we have also a smart sheet product that we launched recently. Those are sheets that you put on the bed, and there are 4 patterns at the corner. Again, 100% cotton with no electronics. And when the camera detects those patterns, it can tell what the camera can say what is the height of the baby, so we can track the growth of the baby and the full skeleton of the baby over time. And we have a really nice watch them grow compilation that you can see of your baby. And we also have joint research about the product, but I stop for now.
Oh, that's awesome. I wish I'd had something like this when my kids were little. And I think what I also like is that you're tying together interesting science about sleep and so forth, as well as a practical consumer product. It's very cool.
Yeah, and it is a research tool.
Yeah. Neve, tell us a little bit about Biotia.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me. Really excited. Love Runway so much. We wouldn't be here. Biotia wouldn't be here without you guys. So yeah, I'm the CEO, one of the co-founders of Biotia. Joined the Runway program in 2015. And so at Biotia, we focus on fighting infectious diseases powered by genomics and AI. So the current approach for infectious disease diagnostics uses technology, mostly culturing, which is technology from the 1800s, which is pretty wild. So this is when you take a sample from a patient, could be urine or blood, and you grow it on a petri dish and you look through a microscope to identify microbial species. This is really slow. It takes days to weeks, depending on what you're growing. And it's really, really labor intensive, and really only a limited number of microbial species can be cultured. So it's somewhere around less than 5% of species can be cultured. So what we're doing instead is we have built a test that we use genomics and our software. So we actually, we take a sample, we extract DNA and RNA, we sequence that using next generation sequencing. We take the sequence data and we run it through our software that we've built, and we profile the total microbiome of a sample, including drug resistance markers and virulence markers, so we can produce a report to guide clinician treatment of the patient. So we make drug recommendations. So we've built this out for, also it's, one single test and it's about a day to results. So we've built this out for urine testing, to test for urinary tract infections, which is the most common type of infection. And then we're finding that it's performing really well in urine. And then we've also extended this platform for COVID-19 testing. In the last year, we partnered with Twist Bioscience, which is a large publicly traded company. And we have built a test with them, which we've launched as a research use only product. It's being used across Europe and increasingly in the US. And this allows us to actually capture the virus and sequence the total viral genome of SARS-CoV-2. And so we can identify the genetic variants and track how the virus is evolving. This is also under regulatory review. So in the next, hopefully shortly, we'll be getting approval to launch this as a diagnostic product. And then finally, we have a number of other contracts with Goldman Sachs doing COVID testing, and ongoing testing with NASA, where we've been getting samples from the International Space Station and profiling new novel bacterial and fungal species with them, which has been really cool.
Yeah, that's amazingly cool. I was reading about that recently, and I thought, wow, okay, bacteria in space. How is that going to look?
It's great, and they call us Biotians, which I just love.
Biotians, wonderful. That's great. Well, thank you so much, Neve. Server, tell us a little bit about Katena.
Thanks, Greg, and hello, everyone. My name is Server Ertem. I'm the founder and CEO of Katena TDX. Just to cap my background again, I'm a cancer immunologist from Weill Cornell Medicine, and I worked at Memorial Sloan Kettering doing cancer research and discovering a new platform that allowed us to discover a type of biology that's been missing in other technologies for decades. And with that, we are hoping to develop basically products that can help cancer patients. These could be cancer therapeutics, or in the shorter term, it could be cancer diagnostics. In our field, the product development cycles for therapeutics are 10 years, 15 years. But to help patients today, my idea in joining Run the Runway program was to see how I can translate what we know in the biology side to the tech side and see if we can automate that and scale that. Coming into the program, I did not have any background in technology, but being a part of the community, I was able to connect with people who are practitioners in the field that founded the foundation of Katena TDX. And the problem that we realized when we spoke to oncologists and patients as well is that when you take a biopsy sample from a cancer patient, that physical sample is limited in quantity. So there are limited things that you can do for testing. But everybody asked us, if you could do something with just the image of it, that's unlimited because you can manage it in the cloud. So we ran with that idea, actually, and we were able to apply what I have learned from biology into a computer vision machine learning program so that we can now take images of cancer biopsies, not the physical samples. We can analyze it, and hopefully we can match the right patient with the right drugs so that patients don't have to wait for new drugs to be approved. They could potentially be matched to a drug that it's gonna work for them. So that's our hope.
That's very cool. Yeah, one of the things I love about Runway is we're bringing in all this expertise, like in biology, that we don't have to Cornell Tech to partner with people who have expertise in things like machine learning or computer vision. So that's really exciting. Thanks, Server. And Rebecca, tell us about 525 Bio.
Yeah, so 525 Bio is truly a Runway company, right? This is a company that's emerged out of the Runway program and actually not the venture I came in with. And I imagine we'll talk about that later. But 525 Bio is an early stage research and development company with an accent on research. We're focused on COVID at the moment. So we have created a diagnostic test that is predictive of severity, both early stage in disease and actually potentially before people get sick. So this is going to be really important in terms of treatment interventions. If you intervene early in COVID, right, you have better outcomes. And also the current round of vaccines, it's going to probably in the second generation, we're going to need to stratify people based on their pre-existing profiles to which vaccine they're going to need. So we are at the point now where we're putting that all together and going to go out and license that. And then we will probably move forward on a possible therapeutic, and there's also a potential vaccine strategy in there as well. And the long-term goal is to pivot back towards psychiatry, which is my background as a neuroscientist, at the intersection of the immune system and the brain, which is where my work has been for the past 15 years.
Very cool. Wow, you're bringing it all together. Okay, well, we got a few questions that I wanted to run by you folks about the Runway program itself for the audience. Assaf, what about your Runway experience has proven to be valuable? You're one of the first cohort, so you've been out the longest. What's proven to stand the test of time? What's been useful to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, when I'm looking back, and it started like 7 years ago when I started the Runway, I think that Runway really helped to anchor the company around science fundamentals, building the product with core IP technology behind them and a true invention and science. And I think that one of the reasons for this is the very unique IP structure that was offered to startups for PhD students that open for postdoc that open a company as part of the Runway. That was, I invented the idea of Uzi Dehan, the founder of Runway, that thought about this idea. And just for us to understand, universities are really good in generating IP and invention. They're not really good in commercializing this idea if you are familiar with tech transfer processes. On the other end, you have industry that are really good in commercializing because otherwise they won't exist. But the process of creating IP is not natural for them. They need to do it really on when the product is just invented and before you talk about it with the world. And then came Uzi and Adam also with a very generous approach for IP in university and their entrepreneurial spirit, and created an IP structure that allow us to commercialize science with a worldwide royalty-free kind of agreement that won't remove barrier for financial investors to put money in those companies. And by doing this, they created a very unique environment when you can actually commercialize science. And today we have more than 30, 40 patents and papers that was published in leading journals. Thanks to this, also they encourage us to submit patents. So we have a very solid IP strategy at Nanit that is also a very strong indicator for a success of a big company if you have such a strong basis of invention.
Right. Yeah, I think it is really different and innovative compared to other programs I've seen at other universities. And like I said, we value the sort of deep science and technical expertise that the postdocs bring because we think that's the kind of impact that Cornell Tech should have. So wonderful. Neve, I'm curious how you discovered Runway. I mean, you were one of the earlier postdocs in the program and have been very successful. How did you trip across it? What drew you into it?
Yeah, it was actually also Uzi for me, Uzi Dehan. I saw Uzi giving a talk at the New York Academy of Sciences. And I think the session had to do with alternative pathways for PhDs. And when you're in grad school, in a lot of grad programs, they really train you to become a professor. There seems to be like one track. And I had been involved in a lot of grant writing as a grad student and publishing papers. And it didn't seem, I wanted to look at other pathways. And, grant writing, it's frustrating because there's a lack of funding for a lot of, science in this country and lots of other countries. And then also even with publishing, there's this great thrill when you publish a paper, but then maybe 3 people read it, hopefully more, but sometimes it feels like it stops there. So it was attractive to shift from publishing to building products that actually could be used by people and have this impact. And then when I interviewed with people in the program with Uzi and other folks, it was really exciting to see the motivation that it wasn't, that a lot of it was about building these products that could change the world and that sort of thing. So it felt like a really great fit.
That's wonderful. Great story. Server and Rebecca, you guys ended up teaming up and working together over the last year. Can you tell us a little bit about that story and how that came about?
Sure. Would you like to go first, Rebecca?
I'll let you go, Server.
Okay. Like I said, I started the program, came into the program with the vision of using my knowledge in oncology to build products. But I think it was mid-March when New York City was locking down that I got a phone call from Rebecca and saying, we both have biological backgrounds and I had some technology which might apply to actually the virus, how the virus attaches to the cells and how the virus can stay airborne for such a long time. And as two entrepreneurs, that we started to look at the problem from different angles. If this is a science problem, or is it also a manufacturing problem? Is it a supply chain problem? So that really led us to put our heads together and see what are the multiple ways that we can approach this problem, and see what are the solutions that we can provide to the world, and hopefully to Cornell Tech.
Very cool. Rebecca, anything to add there?
I was just thinking, so I remember this. So I had, you could feel, it was almost around this time, almost exactly this time last year. And nothing had closed down yet. So I was out buying running shoes and a bike from near Penn Station, which I was then going to take that bike on the subway. And I remember having this insight, calling Server, because this was really, some of his expertise was really relevant to way the spike is on the coronaviruses, and also the way it's modified. And I had actually come in working on social finance instruments to fund generic drug repurposing and other targets. As I think we all know, there's a lot of space in science, particularly biomedical science, that is just as there's not incentives to support the development. That's sort of the valley of death. And Server and I like to think that between the way Runway is structured and then just the way the pandemic played out, it's really been about, it feels like 10 years of market experience compressed into one. And what I will really just point out is that I came in, I think I'm the first venture that was probably going to be a nonprofit or hybrid for-profit nonprofit to start. And working at the intersection of probably game theory, finance, IP law, and biomedical drug development. And, I just can't imagine any other program coming in needing several types of deep expertise that really only lives in academia, intersecting then with the desire to do social good, right? There are incubator programs that will support for-profit companies. There are a few that will do deep science and nonprofit companies and policy. So it's really a unique program. And I think the other thing I would say is that as Server and I, we worked together, we talked every day for months there. But Greg, we also talked to you every week for months there, because this was really a group effort. And I think the program and the Institute just really, I think it's also, Cornell Tech is a startup in its own right in some ways. And that allowed you guys to work with us in this incredibly agile, impactful way that I can't imagine any other academic institute doing that.
Yeah, it's an infectious place because you bump into smart people like Rebecca and Server, Neve, Assaf, and you see them coming together in ways that and thinking creatively about, okay, I have this expertise here, I have this expertise there. The peanut butter meets the chocolate, and all of a sudden you got a really cool Reese's cup coming out of it somehow. It's a lot of fun. One of the other things that I like about it is the Jacobs Institute is just set up to be experimental and to try things like, for example, the IP agreement that Uzi and Adam and so forth set up. Really different, really experimental, and many universities would shy away from that, worried, they were either going to leave money on the table or that they were going to stifle impact, or and I like the fact that Jacobs has become the place where we point to flexibility for doing things. But it's also a partnership with the Technion, and Assaf, as a Technion graduate, it's kind of a special thing to have that connection. Were there other ways that we connect to the Technion that you find impactful or useful?
Yeah, for me, first, Technion is my home, is where I did my PhD. But I can say that Israel is the startup nation, and Technion is a leading research institute in Israel that build one of the most innovative entrepreneurs came out of this university and build great products. And I think that Technion brought this spirit together with Cornell. And if I'm talking about the bureaucracy behind this IP thing that we talked about, this is how it was solved. And at the beginning, the Runway was a startup. We were 30 people at the Google building next to Chelsea Market, including postdocs. And I remember Ramin Zabi used to be my supervisor, and we thought about how to solve my major revision in a journal paper that was rejected. And it wasn't really clear what we're going to do during this Runway during the 2 years. And this entrepreneurial spirit that came from the Technion, I believe, together with Cornell, helped to solve all these challenges. For me, particularly, Peretz Levi is one of the founders of sleep medicine. He used to be the president of the Technion when I joined Runway, and I was trying to solve how to measure sleep with a camera, and he connected me with top researchers in the field of cognitive motor developments and sleep. Avi Sadeh at Tel Aviv University, that when he was at Brown, developed the gold standard to how to measure sleep with actigraphy. It's like Fitbit for kids. And with Chaviva Veller, she's a director at Cornell Weill. We have cameras in her sleeping lab at Cornell Weill, and we do some studies there. But also David Gozal, he's running the Children's Hospital at Missouri. And also he's on our advisory board together with Tom Andres, that he used to be the dean of School of Medicine at UC Davis. And all those people, he's also one of the pioneers that used video to classify sleep back in the 80s and even before. So I was fortunate to connect to all those people, and we do a lot of joint research with university. And of course, from the Cornell side, there was a lot of support. Deborah Estrin and Serge Belongi and Aaron Holiday, that is also the first Nanit customer, and Greg Pass. So from both sides of the table, I would say there was a big support in building Nanit.
It just struck me that Peretz was a sleep expert and Martha Pollack is an AI expert. So in some ways, Nanit was sort of fated to happen, right? When you bring
and just let you know, it started with Cornell and Technion, but today we are working with CUNY University and HSS and Yale and Ben Gurion University and Fleet University and UCLA and through Autism Speak. So we have a lot of joint research collaboration that all started with this Runway of trying to commercialize science and creating a research tool.
Yeah, great story. So, I mean, and you brought up the connections to the Weill Sleep Lab, and one of the other opportunities for Cornell Tech in particular has been being here in New York, having that closer geography and connection to Weill. Neve, can you comment on that and your ties to the medical school and how that's helped or supported, and how you see that's affecting other runways?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think it's really the whole biotech landscape in New York has changed even since we started. So in the last 5 years, it's been a pretty profound shift. When we started, we were actually, we have a software component and then a lab component. And so we have a CLIA lab right now at SUNY Downstate Biobat. But we were initially looking for lab space, and we were in Gen Space, which is a community lab, which has a bunch of there's a ton of high school students that are doing research there. I couldn't bring samples in from outside, so I was just taking swabs of like my own nose to sequence, and just sequencing myself for a while there. And then we moved up to Harlem Biospace and SUNY. So there was really limited space available for labs. And that has changed. The lab space is, it's growing. There's more opportunity. It's really exciting to be part of this whole biotech community that's growing in New York. Of course, the connection with Weill Cornell has been amazing. My co-founder, Dr. Chris Mason, is a professor at Weill Cornell. And he is one of those crazy scientists who's always doing a million things. I met him, he was swabbing the New York City subway and building a microbial map of New York City. It was reported that he had found the bubonic plague on the subway, which is not true. But yeah, so that connection to Weill has been incredible. But we definitely think about, both the opportunities for being in New York and some of the limitations And we have found that, we are happy in New York, and we've built this like full community through Cornell Tech. And we have this CLIA lab now in New York, which is kind of incredible because it was very hard to get. But once you get it, you can sell into the New York market, and the New York market is 25% of the US market. So it's a really large market. So it is a great place to be positioned overall. The net is definitely positive.
Yeah. And Chris, by the way, is also another person that really dove into the testing and other challenges for COVID. In fact, we were working with his lab. Server and Rebecca were sort of consulting for me during the height of the crisis about testing to help test the students here on campus. And Chris's lab was very helpful and very instrumental in reaching out to us. So yeah. It's a kind of a nice, for a city of 11 million people or whatever it is, it's actually a relatively small community that actually knows each other and connects in useful ways, especially along the tech scene.
Yeah, and especially given COVID, it's been incredible seeing everybody come together and researchers really just share data freely and just be really collaborative. Yeah,
and the EDC and other things have tried to help. I think it's hard for people to imagine what it was like here last year about the same time. It was a scary situation, and I think everybody wanted to step up and help, and particularly people connected to biology and medicine. So anyway, so Rebecca, Server, you've been in the Runway program for a couple of years now, and you came in with one conception maybe of where you wanted to start from, but you've definitely pivoted and changed and adapted. What has been most useful to you in your journey as postdocs in thinking about commercialization of the ideas that you have, or where you want to go, where you want to end up when you get out of this place?
I think for startups, a lot of things are going against us. The only thing that's going for us, outside the larger companies, is our flexibility, our nimbleness, and that we can react to change much faster than anybody else. But for that, we need flexibility and resources and a program, and in terms of an investor who can understand that mentality. So with the Runway program, we actually found that flexibility so that we can use the resources in a way that we can pivot, or we can add certain programs into our system. And more importantly, I think building great companies takes time, in the sense that you need to understand your customers, you need to do your business hypotheses, and to be able to validate those hypotheses in an academic setting. And Runway gave us those methodologies to be able to hypothesize how to build a business and test those hypotheses in real world, and come back and see where we can spend our resources. And again, it comes back to, it takes a village. In this case, it really takes a campus to build a company for the people that helped us with the technology, as well as practitioners that we were connected to. All that advice that we got actually give us the runway, not financial capital, but also human and social capital that helps us validate or disvalidate or disqualify hypotheses before we spend too much resources on a project.
Yeah. Rebecca, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of all the different possible things to say in response. I think one of the things that's been really, really clear is that ideas have their time, and the importance of the market and the state of the market and the stage of the market, and the protectability of your technology. And I think both for Server and myself, it was really interesting to see the market all of a sudden be really ready for, Server came in with, I think, some really brilliant insights into how the diagnostic space needed to be updated, and there wasn't that much appetite at the time. And obviously there's a ton of appetite now. And I came in with, I guess I'm thinking back, there's something Jeff Ling said to me years ago. So he's the founding director of the Biological Technologies Office at DARPA. And he said to me once, as I was sort of starting on this journey, he's like, let the science lead. Just no matter what you do, always let the science lead. And that really resonated with me. And one of the things I will say about Runway is they really let you do that, right? There's the support to let the science lead, but there's also the other side of things, which is science isn't the only thing that goes into making a successful venture, whether it's a for-profit startup or a nonprofit, or that's not the only source of impact. I think everything this year has sort of taught me that. I think what I would just say is that, there's so many different insights, and I have not had the opportunity to compile all of them, but this past year, both in Runway, with the support of Runway, going through the impact of the pandemic, it's just, I think I would say I feel really privileged to have been in the program during this time, because it has been so productive in a time that I think could have been so destructive. So I guess it's not a super clear answer. It's not one thing, it's many, many different things. I don't think we've touched even on just the fact that the people in the Institute are just wonderful, insightful, kind people. I think now that we all live on Zoom and we've barely interacted with other humans, there's a lot to be said just for the ethic of the program. So I'll leave it there, and I'll keep thinking. I'll get back to you, Greg, with maybe more concise.
Love your answer. I mean, let the science lead, but science alone is not enough. We should put that on a T-shirt or something. That was wonderful. Well, Assaf, Neve, Server, Rebecca, thank you so much. This has been for me, a wonderful conversation. Runway is, I think, one of the most important and impactful programs that we have here at Cornell Tech, and we really are proud of you and all that you've managed to accomplish already, and look forward to watching your careers and your companies and your lives unfold. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.